There's a fair bit of lace in this issue, so I thought it was a good opportunity to give you some lace knitting tips. All lace is created the same way, yarn overs to create intentional holes and decreases to compensate to keep things even. And all of this different array of lace, all of those different beautiful patterns are created that same way, different arrangements of yarn overs and different decreases. As a knitting teacher, I get a little bit frustrated by the name yarn over because it doesn't really describe what you're doing. And what you do depends on whether you're a yarn right hand or a yarn left hand knitter. And it depends on whether you're between knit stitches and purl stitches. So let's quickly review what a yarn over actually is. If you're yarn right hand, as I'm positioned now, if I'm between knit stitches, you bring the yarn between the tips of the needles like so. And that's it. That's the yarn over. It's not completed until you knit the following stitch. You see it gets draped over the needle, but that following stitch is not counted as part of the yarn over. The yarn over is simply the motion to bring the yarn forward. If you're yarn left hand, you bring the yarn to the front and let it drape over the needle before you knit the next stitch. So the same thing is happening. It's creating that yarn over draped around the needle. If you've just worked a purl, your yarn's already in front, but that's not enough to create the yarn over. The yarn has to be pulled over the needle and around to the front again so that your yarn over is there. And there's my purl stitch. And if you're yarn left hand, let me reposition here. Again, the yarn is in front, so let it run over the needle and back around to the front again before you purl to create your yarn over. If you've just worked a knit stitch and the next thing you need to do is a purl after your yarn over, you bring the yarn to the front, but that won't be enough because that's just in the purl position. So again, the yarn has to come all the way around the needle again to complete that yarn over before you work the next stitch. And so that's yarn right hand, and if you're yarn left hand, again, bring the yarn to the front, drape it over the needle and around to the front again. So it sort of feels like a double wrap. It's not. You just bring it to purl position and then over the needle again. And then if you've just worked a purl stitch and you need to work a knit, there's a yarn over in between. This one's actually the simplest. Because your yarn's already in front here, you just knit the following stitch and it completes your yarn over for you magically. This one's rather clever, I think. And so here, let's undo that. And if you're yarn right hand, you've just purled, your yarn is in the front, just leave it there to knit the following stitch and there's your yarn over. It's been created for you. The most common mistake with lace is a missed yarn over, and this is the easiest thing in the world to resolve. On the following row, on the wrong side row, as long as you know where the yarn over was supposed to be, you can pick it up, no problem. I find it's easier if you flip the work over so you're looking at the right side, and all you do is you grab the bar, because that's actually what that yarn over is. The yarn over is just the bar that runs between the stitches, expanded by letting it drape over the needle. So if there's a missed yarn over, simply pick up the bar, make sure it's oriented right leg forward so that it's open, and there's your missed yarn over. Easy, no need to undo. Just pick them up on the following wrong side row. And you can actually fix a missed yarn over 2 rows back. I wouldn't go back any further because you start to run out of space and things start to look cramped. But if you should have had one 2 rows ago, you just pick up the bar 2 below with your crochet hook here, and then pick up the bar 1 below and pull it through. Let me pop that up on my needle so you can see what it looks like here. And I'm going to do that again just really quickly just so you can see the visual here. Because what I'm doing is I'm picking up the strand. I'm picking up the strand. And this is why you do need to be careful. 2 below. And then I pull the above strand through it. So it's just like picking up a drop stitch, but you're making a hole. You don't want to go any more rows down because the problem is you're asking too much of the row. You're trying to create a new stitch and there just isn't enough of a bar there to get an extra stitch. Your work will look a little bit cramped. I've shown you how to deal with a missed yarn over. The challenge with lace knitting though is those decreases, because it can be pretty difficult to deal with a missed decrease or an incorrect decrease, or indeed sometimes maybe the chart didn't quite work out the way you intended to. So this is where a lifeline becomes handy. And a lifeline is a length of smooth, contrasting color yarn fed through the stitches in your work, so that if something has gone horribly wrong, I'm not saying it will, but it might, you can save your knitting. If you've got a lifeline threaded, you can just take your work off the needle. This is remarkably satisfying, and just tug on it and retrieve the stitches. And what you'll do is you will feed the needle through the stitches following the path of the lifeline here to restore them all. You do have to be a little bit careful at the ends and around the decreases and the yarn overs, because things may move around a bit. As you can see, those had done that. But that is the nice thing about the lifeline. All the stitches are there. They're all perfectly safe. And so you can tug on them and stretch them out as you need to. There you go. All saved. How you actually thread the lifeline is very straightforward. I've got some smooth contrasting color yarn here, and I'm going to feed it through the stitches. And this is where working on a circular becomes handy, because I will slide the stitches down onto the cord so that it's much easier to feed through. And so I'm just with my darning needle here, threading the lifeline yarn through all of the stitches. And do write down the row you've just finished. I like to thread my lifeline after a wrong side row. After a wrong side row, ideally that's correct. And I'll write down what row I've just finished, so that if I do have to undo, I'll know where to pick up again. And now you just keep knitting. Can provide an excellent bookmark too if you're keeping track of pattern repeats. How often I thread a lifeline is really a case of how much am I willing to lose, how much am I willing to undo. And I sometimes have two on the go, moving them up one by one, so that I really am saving my work if something has is a challenging pattern that I need to pay a lot of attention to. We've talked about yarn over, let's talk about decreases. We've got knit two together, and that one's easy. It's exactly what it says on the tin, knit two stitches together. That leans to the right. You can see the stitch there and there. We need a left leaning decrease to go with. And we have a choice of two. We have SKP and SSK. And I've done them both here. SKP is there, SSK is there. And as you can see, there really isn't a lot of difference between the two. There's a minor difference in the angle, but really doesn't matter all that much. And I find that, honestly, as long as you're consistent within a project, they're essentially interchangeable. Use the one you prefer. I'm going to demo them both. SKP is the more traditional one. It's the one that was used in older pattern books, and it goes as follows. Slip a stitch knitwise, knit the following stitch, and lift the slip stitch over like you're casting off, like you're binding off. SKP. Sometimes you won't see that abbreviation. You might see it actually written out as slip one, knit one, PSSO, pass slip stitch over. Knit one more stitch. Okay, so SSK goes as follows. Slip a stitch as if to knit, slip a second stitch as if to knit, and put the left needle into the fronts of those two stitches from left to right and knit those together. This is a newer one. It was actually developed by Barbara Walker, and she developed it because she feels that it's a better match for knit two together when they're close together in a pattern. Again, which you use is really your preference. Some people suggest that slipping the second stitch as if to purl makes a tidier decrease. It does tighten it up because it twists the lower stitch and you get a slightly neater line. Again, I would say that that's a point of personal preference. The original conception of it was both stitches slipped as if to knit, but if you want to slip the second one as if to purl to tidy it, absolutely. There's another way to tidy up that SSK decrease though, and I've done it in my sock here. If you're a sock knitter, what you might have noticed is that that gusset line, that left leaning gusset line, is a little bit untidy. It can be a bit wobbly. Here what I've done is indulged in a trick I learned from Kat Bordy. Do the SSKs as written, both stitches slipped as if to knit, but on the following row or round, work the stitch that sits above the SSK through the back loop. And it tidies things up very nicely. It just brings those two stitches in alignment, the SSK and the stitch on the even row above it.